So if I share my screen, this is a 3D digital image of what the boat was supposed to look like, right? Okay, just a quick background. I started sailing in Glenans in Baltimore in the mid 80s. I blagged my way onto a cruiser course. I should have gone through a dinghy 1 and 2, and I blagged my way on a cruiser course. I was reading about all the long distance sailors for years, the Joshua Slocums and all the greats. And I always, in the back of my head, I wanted to do a transatlantic, a single-handed transatlantic. And last in the spring of 20, just when the COVID was hitting, I saw a website for a Globe 580, called Don McIntyre, famous adventure race organizer. He organized the Globe, the Golden Globe, 4 years ago that Gregor McGuckian took part in. He's now up in Malahide. He's the organizer. He started a website for Globe 580 with the idea being that anybody could build a boat, a 19-foot boat in plywood, covered in fiberglass and epoxy, and race it across the Atlantic, with the ultimate aim being to take part in 2024 in a round the world trip. I just want to, sorry, 2 seconds, get this down here. Yeah, so I know what's going on here. So as a plan, the big plan, that Don's plan is to race these boats around the world in 2024 in a staged race all the way around, a non-stop. Well, there'll be stopovers of a week or so in every place, but he called it a race of attrition. If you pause, the other guy catches up and passes you. That's the plan. Anyway, so I saw this idea of the Globe 580s, which is basically a poor man's mini transat. Like mini transat started in the 70s by an English guy, was it called Salmon, I think? And the French really jumped on it, but they're 21-foot boats. They're 21 foot and they're beamier, they're wider and faster. So this is a kind of a poor man's mini transat. It was a Polish guy called Janusz Mederski designed it, copied, or a bigger version of a boat he had. I can't think of the name now. He designed a slightly smaller version of it. Setka, that's it, sorry, a boat called a Setka. I think they were a 17 or 18 foot long. And Don approached him and asked him could he just kind of beef it up a bit for ocean racing. So he did that, but he kept it at 19 foot deliberately that it would fit into a 20-foot shipping container and ship it anywhere around the world for races or events. That's the ultimate goal. So the bowsprit comes off, all the tiller, all the rudder and the self-steering gear at the back comes off. So effectively it's a 19-foot plywood boat. The keel is held on with 10 stainless steel bolts. So if I get out your spanner or sockets, as you can take off the keel and shove it into a 20-foot container and ship it all around the world. Now, that was, of course, before the whole shipping industry changed and prices changed. That was the plan 3 years ago. So how quickly things have moved on. Anyway, that's what it looks like in 3D. Where am I going here? Why can't I move it on here? There we go. That's just another little 3D rendering of, that's called Trekka. That's actually Don's boat, number 1. Trekka, named after John Goswell's famous little boat, a small boat across the Atlantic called Trekka. So this was the race. This was the idea. This what got my heart racing. 3,600 miles across the Atlantic. So the idea was to start in the south of Portugal and do a qualifying race to the Canary Islands. That was the plan. All these long races seem to have a qualifier just to weed out, to filter out any hopefuls or dreamers who haven't quite got the wherewithal to finish the qualifier. So that's a filter. So the idea was to filter us all and get from Portugal to Canary Islands and start the race there across the Atlantic. Originally it had been Martinique, and then he switched it, or it had been both Martinique or Antigua, and he eventually switched it to Antigua, and I ended up going to Martinique. Well, let's tell you there now, 2,000 miles. So that was I rang Don, actually. I was nearly finished, summer of 21, and I rang Don and said, give me a deadline. And he said, if you're in Lanzarotte by the 18th of November, you're on. I said, right. And that was my reason for taking part in a race. I'm not a racer by nature. I'm a cruiser, a slow sailor. I like to see things and take my time. But I knew if I didn't have a deadline, it would never happen. As you know, you've all known people who have boats. They're building boats in backyards forever. And next year we're doing this, and the year after we're going to do this. And I knew that was me too. So I needed a deadline to get the boat finished and in the water. So I had to have it race ready, totally ready to go by the 18th of November in the Canary Islands. And that was the plan. So a fellow asked me recently, how do you build a boat and sail across the Atlantic? And that's how you do it. You start with 25 sheets of plywood. It's 9mm marine ply, or Kumi marine ply. Technically, it's a kit because all those sheets of plywood on the bottom there, they're all the parts, all the pieces for the boat, every section, every bit of the hull and the deck and all the bits and pieces are cut out in CNC'd out and held in with just little tabs every few inches. And the hard one on top is lovely straight Douglas fir. So all the frames and the deck beams and all those bits and bobs are held together with Douglas fir. I got that from Fine Boats in the UK because Don licensed one boat building company in each country to produce the timber for the kit as such. Now, they call it a kit. It saved me probably, 6 weeks lofting and measuring and drawing and cutting. But the real beauty to me was because it was CNC cut, every bit was exactly right to the millimetre. So I knew that if something didn't fit, I was wrong, not the boat. And that's what happened. I was just putting the final frames together and putting the hull on as a dry fit, and I was wrong by about 15 millimetres. So I took the whole thing apart and backed a week and started again. So I'll show you this as I go along, right? That's building one of the frames on the floor. I got a big sheet of heavy plywood and made that left hand line there, that left hand edge was my basically the bottom edge for all the frames. So the center line up from that, and everything is measured from that center point in that frame on the left hand edge, out and up from one point. And then I'd take diagonal measurements. I had to be exactly right. And without a few mil, I had to take it apart. So each of those frames took about a day to make, sometimes 2 days, because I had to dry fit them. Sometimes I took them apart 2 or 3 times to make sure I had it pinned right down. And I'd put pieces, I'd screw pieces of wood all around the edges to lock it in position before the final epoxy. Because I knew as soon as I hit the epoxy, I had half an hour to epoxy it. And then it started to go jelly, go hard. And that was it. There's no going back. So you had to get each bit done right as you were doing it. There was no messing. That's my little garage. The garage was 20 foot long, so it extended out. There's an extension out the back. You see, that's all white polystyrene insulation on a 2 meter extension where the garage door was. Because the garage is 20 foot and the boat is 19 foot, so it was a bit tight. So I was able to put the bow of the boat out there. And I literally had 1.5 foot all around to work in. Like when I think back, I've been out in the shed several times since. What was I thinking, building a boat in here? Anyway, that's some of the frames complete up there on the left-hand side. Built a strong back on the floor and put up verticals, and then you hang the frames on that. So I had a laser level to get my water line. So all the water lines were marked on each frame, and the center line, of course. I had to get everything perfectly centered and straight and true. And there was one frame, actually that frame second in there, I was working away and I put up some stringers along the side as a test. I dry fit the stringers, and I kept getting different measurements. And every time I measured it, I was wrong 5 or 10 millimeters. I took it all apart again and I found that frame was slightly not parallel with the rest of the frames. And I threw everything out. So I had to, again, that was another day of just going backwards to go forwards, you know. This is a little video. And my son put me on TikTok, so I put this on TikTok one day. Here we go. Hope this works. Hi, Jim here. I'm currently building a Class Globe 580 sailboat, with the idea being to sail across the Atlantic next November. Today, I'm cutting out the slots for the stringers on the keel pieces. Solid oak, so it's slow work. So this is going to be a series of little TikToks about my progress, both forwards and backwards. Stay tuned. Now, those keel pieces, I got those made in local joinery. They were solid oak, and there was a choice of building the boat upside down and then turning it over and putting in the keel, the keel beam. Those beams keep up, they hold up the keel. So the keel, there's bolts through those that go onto the T-piece at the bottom of the top of the keel. So there was a choice of building it either finishing the boat and turning it up and putting in the keel pieces, or doing as I did, and I put in the keel pieces, quinters upside down. Slightly more awkward, but it was better in the end because I was able to see what I was doing all the way along, because I was able to fit the stringers to the keel pieces as opposed to the keel pieces to the stringers. And I found it more obvious. I could see what I was doing better, simply like that. That's why I chose that route in the end. I'm glad I did. We'll see, can I move on here? There we go. That's another view of the uprights and the frames. That's the stringers just dry fitted. And there's a plan on the wall behind me. I thought it looked kind of cool to have plans on the wall. I wanted to make this kind of a real boat shady look, Let's have that, That's a view from the bow. The string, there was two different sizes. There was 70mm stringers and 30mm stringers. And those 70mm there in the middle and on the gunnel were bastards to bend. The pressure bending those, I used kind of Spanish windlass inside. And I had to put big long stainless steel screws through the stem there to lock it in position. And epoxy. I remember the day I took it apart thinking, is this going to hold? And it held. I was amazed, again, at the strength of epoxy. It's literally like welding wood. Like the joint. And the curious thing, which is total blasphemy for boat builders, but for epoxy joinery, if you have a tiny gap, it's better than a perfect fit. If you have a millimeter or half a mil of a gap, the epoxy has somewhere to go, and it soaks into both sides and makes its own little and a weld in the middle. And I did a few test pieces before I started it, and any one I was able to break, the wood broke all around the joint. So the joint ends up stronger than the wood around it. So there's nothing to fear with epoxy if you do it right. Putting on the side panels. One of those days I put on the side panels and they didn't meet at the bow. I was going right from the edge of the transom. There was 3 sheets on either side. I was wrong by about 15mm. And whatever way I did it, I couldn't get it right. So I knew something was crooked. So I had to go take it all off. And I just dry fitted the stringers at that stage. Take them all off again, reset, found them. There was 5mm here, 5mm there. Was wrong. And it all added up. And in the end, the two just came together one day and said, get that screwed together quickly. Don't even breathe on it. That's finishing off. That's sanding. I filled out that's a double layer bottom on it. That's 2 9mm layers on the bottom. And the stem, and a bit of spare doubles for just to round off the front, or the what do you call that? The bottom of the stem, just where the water line would be hitting you. Somebody will tell me. Okay, so I'll keep going. Right, started with fiberglassing. I had to tape all the joints with fiberglass tape. So I only was sanded down totally. Any little holes filled up with epoxy, so there's a smooth sanded finish. 400-gram tape on every joint, and then covered in peel ply, which my first time ever using peel ply, a fantastic substance. It's basically like a nylon sheet that you put over the wet epoxy. The epoxy soaks into it. So you take a little bit of epoxy out of the joint, but it's not starved. It's just, if you roll hard or squeegee, with a hard plastic squeegee, go along the surface, the excess epoxy squeeze out of the tape into the peel ply. And then when you pull it off the next day, you have a beautiful sanded finish. It's like an 80 grit sanded finish. So it's not a smooth epoxy finish. It's a lovely sanded finish. But it's very wasteful for peel ply because every single part of epoxy with the peel ply, take it off, and it's only one shot go. So it's one use per go. That's it all covered in fiberglass. That's 2 layers of 600 gram cloth. It was hard to work with. It was like you had to really squeegee in the epoxy to make it set. So I wet out the surface of the plywood first, then put on a sheet transversely, like from the center out over both sides. Because I was doing it all by myself, I seen some guys in the States doing it, and they had like 10 guys in one day, and they coated the whole boat in one day. But I knew I couldn't do that, so I was doing it by myself. So I did the transom on one day, and then just worked along. There were I went by 2 meter widths of cloth, and I worked my way along and overlapped them by about a 50 or 60 mil. And then on the next layer, I overlapped that with the first layer. So there are all those little joints, all those overlaps are about 50 mil apart. Or sorry, 500 mil. I say half a meter staggered along. So it's like a brickwork. But that was these 2 layers, 1200 gram fiberglass cloth. And the bottom I put on, I think in the center of the bottom where the keel was going to be, I put on about 4 layers just to make doubly. Again, I was probably overbuilding it, but I know it's as strong as a tank, and it stood up to everything. I had to fair it, and that's epoxy filled. I mixed with a brown, a micro balloon fairing. The best thing I did there was I got a local builder to come in and start plastering. I tried it one day, I got nowhere. Called the guy I knew who was a fantastic plasterer, and he said, "No bother, Jim, it's just a curved wall to me." And we'd spent the whole day mixing and plastering, and he did the whole boat, or the two of us did the whole boat in one day. Then I had to start sanding it with a longboard, the whole thing. It took a week of over and back and over and back and over and back to get all the high points down. And then you're left with low points. And I thought we'd just patch in the low points, and he came back and said, "No, Jim, we'll just give another skim again, just like I said, it was inside the house. Do a heavy skim and do a light skim." So we did another skim. And that's what it's like after he's skimming. But then I had to sand it again, of course, you see, to get it smoothened out and get all the high points down. And then I primed it with the paint. There's a laser showing that's the water line. The bottom one is the top water line, which would be the fully laden water line. And the bottom one there is the fully laden water line, and the top one is the unladen water line. In the end, I actually got a little hacksaw blade and I just did a very, very light hacksaw mark along the front of that, because I knew I was going to lose my waterline when I was painting it. That worked in the end, because the waterline was going to extend from the top line there to a centimetre below the bottom of the transom. That was the waterline. So I knew that from the plans, and it worked out perfectly. Turned it over, great fun turning it over. Took a whole day to turn it over. I had to cut the rafters to make it fit, but I finally swung it over. And then, as you know, I was only, I was less than probably a quarter of the way. I thought I was flying it. I take it back, I was less than a quarter of the way to make the hull. Then I had to fit out all the frames inside, fitting out the whole lot inside. I decided to put in loads of buoyancy. So I think I was the only boat that fitted buoyancy. And from looking at the plans, they gave the measures for a fully buoyant boat. I think I exceeded it, because it worked out about 800 kilograms. It's just shy of a metric ton, which should be a cubic meter of buoyancy. Is a metric ton of like a cubic meter of volume is a metric ton of water, which should, Archimedes' principle, keep a ton of stuff up with just that much buoyancy. So I reckon I had more than a square meter or a cubic meter of buoyancy, and I had it in various lockers really well screwed down, because I knew if you need it, is pushing up with an equal force of the weight of the boat. So the tops of all the lockers that have the buoyancy have to be able to hold the equivalent weight of water and more. Otherwise, it'll sink or it'll pop up. So that took a bit of planning, but I think I got away with it. That's more little lockers. There was only one or two in the plans. I added more just to have a division. I kind of bulkheads and what you call it? What's the word for it? Damaged bulkheads, like a sacrificial bulkhead in case I smashed into something. Like that one, that front piece there with the two white locker heads. That's actually two foam-filled compartments, and they were part of the plans as sacrificial kind of bulkhead if you hit something, and they take the strain and not sink the boat. And of course, everything, the hatches were all way above the waterline, and they were actually above those. The top of those lockers were above the waterline. So, like the old Chinese adjunct principle of loads of individual compartments all going above the waterline. So if one of them is hold, it should just fill that one section and no more. But thankfully, it never got tested. Now, there's a view. I put it on the deck beams and the king plank there in front and all the running back along. I see the lack of space there. Everything was very tight. Ridiculously tight, actually. But anyway, it's done. Done and dusted. More deck beams. Oh, I love my little Japanese saw there in the bottom. Great bit of kit. Cuts on the pull. I used up 3 blades in that handle. They're very thin, very fragile, tiny little teeth, but a beautiful finish, and you cut a lovely straight line. As you get practice at it, you get a lovely pull, a pulling motion, a lovely straight line, a lovely finish. I added that extra and little side bit, so that was all covered in the end and screwed. That was all filled with polystyrene and plywood tops screwed onto it. So they're not epoxied on; they're screwed on, so you can always take them out. Or if anybody ever buys a boat, they can take it out and remodel it. That's the beauty too. I learned about building your own boat, that you know the adaptability down the line, that you can change things. It's not written in stone. It's just made in plywood, but you can take out a bit, put in a bit, you can do what you want, for future changes. Put on the deck. That front join there where you see the epoxy joint coming across and the little shallow triangle, cutting those joints in those deck beams, that took a while because it was a triple angle. It was pieces coming in at an angle, twisting and at an angle, and meeting the gunnel piece at an angle. So those joints there were I drew them on the wood, but I ended up doing it by eye. I just had to keep going, and it looked right, and then it came together. I got away with it. Then the deck had to be covered in fiberglass cloth as well, and sheeted in fiberglass cloth. So everything it's a plywood boat, totally encapsulated in fiberglass. Every bit of the outside, every single millimeter is encapsulated. From the gunnels down is 2 layers, and and the deck is a 1 layer of 600-gram cloth. That's the circle for the bubble. I always wanted a bubble because I was watching Bill, what's your man, a guy in Galway, he died a couple of years ago. Jester, he had a bubble and he had a pram hood. I always wanted a bubble. I thought a bubble looked cool, looked kind of oceanic and going somewhere, So a guy I knew sold me a bubble and I put it on it. That's more of the filler, and then that was before the sanding, and then sanding, and then painting, and then the fun started. That's the little hatch, and there's little side hatches into the lockers on the side. There was big controversy. There was a gang of us talking every day on Facebook Messenger, all the builders, and Don. We asked Don questions, and then we realised Don didn't know the answers because he wasn't building his own boat. Don got his boat built in Poland, so he couldn't really tell us. So we decided that the safest thing was not to put hatches on the cockpit seats, only have a vertical waterproof screw-in hatch. I think that's a good idea because no matter how watertight you have a flat hatch, if you have a big wave coming in over the top, something could go wrong or could even smash through it. So, but if you have a vertical surface, the plan was that any wave I would just pass it by almost. That was the plan. And thankfully that the cockpit, it half filled one day with a big wave come over the back. But that was the worst that happened. I put on the paint on the deck and it didn't dry because I didn't prime it from the gunnels up. And the instruction said no need to prime it, so I didn't. And I waited and I waited and it didn't dry. And I remember the day, this was the height of summer and it was warm in that shed. And after a full week, it didn't dry. And I remember the day I had to decide it has to come off. The paint had to come off. I nearly got physically sick thinking of the work ahead, all the work done, and then to backtrack. So my wife, the two of us, a fair play to Mary, my wife, I got a gallons of acetone, and we started with little kitchen scrubbers, and we started and took all that paint off from the about 3 inches below the gunnels. A whole lot came off, cockpit, the deck, the whole lot. And I had to clean it down and prime it and paint it again, and it worked. That's the day coming out of the shed, so I had to break the wall down, I broke down the whole extension and brought it out. And that's the top bit where all the paint was taken off. Then, of course, that was the height of summer, and I was out painting. I was trying to paint one day, it was too hot. I knew the paint would bubble. So a friend of mine gave me, sorry, that's not the view leaving the shed. It's like a runway heading out. See the big hole in the back of the transom? That's a safe, the two bottom holes are drain holes. That's the height of the cockpit sole. Those two holes, the bottom holes in the transom. And the hole above that is just a safety hole in case the cockpit got swamped and any big wave would flow out of that. So that was deemed to be enough. And nothing came in either because the waterline was actually right on the bottom edge of the transom there. So I got a friend of mine lent me that little awning so I could paint it in full sunshine. Got the painting done, got the bubble on. Alan Murray in Poolbeg gave me those winches and bits and bobs and bits and pieces, and then we started. There's Roger Smith. He his company CME, they made the keel for me. That's the keel. That's the plate, the vertical plate of the keel, and the bottom section there, that bottom curve, is a half section. There's 2 lead torpedoes, combined weight of 140 kilograms, bolted on both sides of that plate. And the top piece, you can just see there's a little, like a serrated edge on the top of that. That's little tabs to key in to the top plate of the keel, and they're all welded together. So that was just to keep it from shifting. That's the keel finished and painted in epoxy paint, and the boat waiting behind it. So then we put the two together, and suddenly you have a big high boat on a trailer. There's Roger running around. That was a weird sensation to see because then suddenly it looks like a boat. But again, I thought I was nearly finished. Sure, I had so much work. I didn't even know how much work was left at this stage. See, I was very naive about the whole thing. I didn't realize how much work was involved, a lot more than I thought, because it's not just a boat. I had to go around at the bay on your own. It had to be race spec ready, you know. I'd keep moving over and never get there. There's the bowsprit put on, the stainless steel put on, and I painted a dirty pink on the side because it had to have like a high vis side for regulation for races. You know, hold on, sorry, I don't know. Yeah, there's the boat going into Poolbeg. It's a strange sensation to see your boat dropping in the first day. Your mind is spinning. Is this going to work at all? Is it going to sit crooked, or you never know, because you're, you know, but it's a good design, I have to say. Like it's sat perfectly. And I forget what's next. We keep going. Called Molly Clare of Poolbeg, and my wife's name is Mary, but nickname Molly, and my daughter's name is Claire. So I was told what to name it, taken out of my hands. There's heading for the ferry. This was the mad rush. We got it. We launched it in Poolbeg. We sailed it for 20 minutes the next morning because RTE were doing a documentary on the Liffey, and they filmed me building it, and they wanted to film me sailing it. So I literally sailed it for 20 minutes on the Liffey, put it back in the trailer, and headed with Alan on the ferry to Rosslare, and then on to Bilbao in Portugal. Mad dash. Got to Bilbao, spent a few days there. The lads had headed off before me, but it wasn't a race, it was a qualifier, so I could take my time and get some jobs done. But Alan and Roger behind told me, listen, Jim, you're going on Thursday morning, like it or not. We're cutting the ropes and pushing it out. And that's the thing. It was never going to be ready. There's always going to be something undone, but I had to go. So here we go. Okay, folks, it's come to this. After 25 sheets of plywood in a shed, more than 12 months ago, I have a boat floating in Lagos in south of Portugal, and all these fantastic people behind me have made it possible. So, kind of nervous. I'm heading off nowish. 210 degrees for the Canaries, and I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, but I'm going to wing it. Like I've winging it all my life, and I'm winging it again today and tonight and next few days, and we'll see what happens. So, thanks for your support. Keep watching. I'll try and do TikToks. I won't be able to do it for next week or so, so don't worry. If you don't hear from me ever again, it was great fun knowing you all, and the best of luck, okay? Good luck, guys. Bye, 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 bye. Yay! There we go. Right, let's see, can I move it on here now? So far, so good. Oh yeah, that guy there behind me in the video, he was from Namibia, and I got talking to him in Portugal. He has crossed the Atlantic 50 times as a skipper, a delivery skipper, and he said his best ever was he crossed it 6 times in 1 year, delivering boats over and back. Talk about a character. He, at one stage, he was becalmed somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic, and he swam with beaked whales for 4 hours, swimming around the boat. So they're out there. Those guys are out there. Where are we going here? We'll move on here. Come on. That was on a Float magazine. So fame at last, my 15 minutes of fame. So headed off. I actually put the self-steering gear on that morning. I had never done it on before. And somebody told me just line everything up perfectly straight and screw it all together, put it on the back of the boat. And Don had left the day before me, and he told me it was 210 degrees direct. So I sailed out of the harbour. First time on the boat in the ocean. Spent about 20 minutes sorting it out, got my angles right, steered for 210 degrees and set up the self-steering gear. I'm so exhausted, I fell asleep for almost 2 days. And between sleeping and getting sick, I was up and down, but the boat just kept sailing. And spot on, 210 degrees the whole way. That's Lagos. No, that's Rubicon Marina in, I've missed something somewhere. Anyway, that's Rubicon in Lanzarotte. And that's the boat there. And then we spent probably too long hanging around there. We spent nearly 3 weeks flapping around. And then the weather got there was a high coming in. So we actually moved the day forward from the 18th to the 17th. So we left a day early after all that. And so it's the tour of the island off kind of sightseeing for a few days here and there. Me enjoying the festivities and beer and pizzas. You know, I mean, now we get this right eventually. Now, Don, of course, is great, a marketing man. He's a fantastic marketer. So he held a press conference, a Facebook press conference before we left. So I did a little TikTok and he didn't say no because it's all publicity.
And here we are. Hi, folks. Jim here again. This is the press conference for the start of the Globe 580 from Lanzarotte. This is the top table. Pete, Don, Miksha, and Etienne. And there we go. The top table, all the competitors, 5 guys in a row. 5 delightfully nutty lunatics heading off on a transatlantic in little boats. And there's somebody else filming all around here for FaceTime and all that. So good to talk to you. See you soon. And good luck, good luck, good luck. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
So that was, then we left and the fun started. I keep going because I'll be talking forever and we'll never get there. I keep talking here. Come on. You're not clicking on for me. There we go. There's just a few. That was heading down the east coast of the Canary Islands. There's a few different islands. I think that's Fuerteventura. I was just getting my feet, and it was very light airs at the start, and I got caught. Basically, there was a high pressure for 3 or 4 days, so I didn't go very far. And 2 of the guys at the start, they saw it coming, and they literally hand steered for 24 hours to get as far south as they could. And they kind of avoided the worst of the high. They kept moving. This is what I hope. I want this to happen here now. Right, we'll see what happens here.
Hi folks, today is Wednesday, 24th of November. We left Lanzarote a week ago today. Now, progress has been slow. I thought it'd be further down than now, but the wind was very light. Last night was a nice bit of breeze, and today again. So I put up my twin, that's the A5, and I've a pulled out jib there, rolling along nicely. Hard to keep it filled because it's a bit fluky, but we're getting there. And there's the trusty old pilot. Of course, you have to christen her, so I christened her Sadie, after our lovely old Labrador, a loyal friend. So if she does half as good as Sadie, she'll be a good friend. Okay? Bye for now. Good luck, good luck, good luck.
From all the books I read, sailors always come to christen their self-steering gear, so I felt obliged to do it, you know. Now we'll see what's next. I'm trying to remember. I should have a list in my head here of what's next, but I forget. Some more weather.
It's Saturday, 27th of November, and I think the trade winds have arrived. There's a steady, strong blow from the northeast, roughly, and good big seas. Just pan around there. There you go, that's what we're looking at. Over there, the rain. I hope it keeps going. Going the same direction, parallel to me. There we go. Time to time, we actually we surf. The wave goes underneath us. It just lifts us up and carries us along. It's disconcerting at first, then you get the hang of it, and well, hey, here we go. Hard to see on camera, but every so often it rises up and flies. Now that's I just have a jib there on stayed out, and we're doing about 5 knots, so I'm quite happy with that. It's the first day, so I don't want to push it and break my Jenniker. I want to test it and see what happens. Here we go.
I hadn't done any previous sailing in boats. We're all testing. The first 2 or 2 or 3 weeks we were just testing it to see if it worked. We didn't know. Nobody knew. They were all brand new boats, first time to sail them, definitely the first time across the Atlantic. And we're all doing the first time Transatlantic as well. So all the people, all the guys involved were sailing basically prototype new boats, sailing they were done with. The whole way. So we're all finding our feet with the wings of the sail configurations. That was a lot rougher than look. For some reason, waves don't come across half as big as they are on the video. That was probably about a 2 meter sea. It doesn't look it there. Take my word for it, honest. Yeah, I'll just keep going and we'll see what other videos. I've a few more to get. Oh yeah, that's a little moth. I was about 400 miles offshore and this little moth arrived one day. And then he vanished again. So I hope he must have got blown off because the trade winds are coming from Africa. So there's only one way they can go, and he couldn't have got back to Africa. So he was fish bait. That's the standard configuration for a good day. I had the jib pulled out, and that's an A5 on an endless furler out on the bowsprit, and the main reefed because we found the problem we all found independently was the jib was too small. The sail plan was unbalanced. The jib was too small for the main. So we all ended up with the main reefed, like sometimes 2 or 3 reefs in the main, and the top flat section would lie along the spreaders. And that would match the jib, but otherwise you'd be rounding up all the time. And when you're on the kind of trade wind is rolling along, you just want to keep it going in a straight line as much as you can. You don't want to be rounding up and twisting all the time. Just keep moving. Keep her going. At some sunsets. That's actually a sunrise because I'm looking back. Lovely fluffy white Simpson clouds. Some days were beautiful, like there's lovely temperatures. Most days were sunny, bright, and windy. I only had a bit of slack wind the first few days, but most days there was no shortage of wind. Of the trades fully hit. I was in a 6-day really heavy session, and Don actually I had a little satellite texting machine, and Don texted us. At that stage he was just ahead of me and he was in the same wind pattern, and he was saying it was between 25 and 35 knots and 3 to 4 meter seas, and that was for 6 days in a row, just non-stop. Blow every day, big blow. And it was a small boat and a very light boat. You get like continually getting tossed around, but you get used to it, like anything. You just get used to the constant motion. And I used to end up sleeping in the middle of the boat, just curled up in a fetal position for a few hours and wake up. Something would wake me. I'd feel something was wrong. The boat was off, or the jib was backed or something, and I'd jump out and fix it and go again. Eggs. That was my last egg. I bought 2 dozen eggs in the Canaries. I should have bought more. So I did a picture of my last egg and German flatbread. That was my breakfast every morning. And I used to cook the egg. I had a little jet boiler just to boil water, put in an egg, and just leave it in boiling water, just sitting in for 15 minutes. It always seemed to cook. Got away with it. Right, there's a nighttime shot, because there was a full moon one night. And just for the non-sailors, sometimes I was showing this to non-sailors, they'd ask you, like, can you stop at night? But obviously you can't, you have to keep going. So it doesn't stop. Roll on, day and night, keep going. That's the full moon. I think that's Jupiter or Saturn. Sound is okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's not great, Jim, when you talk over the video there.
Okay.
The sound, yeah.
It's a noisy video, sorry. on forever. I'm trying to think what I should have a list of what's next, but I don't. So we'll see what happens. See where we end up. The videos take a while to move on. I think they get locked or something. Technically. Come on, video, move on. Maybe she doesn't like me stopping her. Come on, come on, come on. I've got 1 second up. Forget about that. I go back here. Oh yeah, I know I skipped your video. That's it. Here's another one.
I'm going to show you this. The wind and the seas have grown. So I have a badly reefed jib, and I put up the storm sail as well, just to keep the head downwind. That's the plan. I'll give you a quick look around.
There's a little GPS sensor on the back there and the mandatory safety ladder.
Slowly back again.
That's a little tracker there, tied on. That's a yellow thing, the yellow brick tracker.
I'll bring in that jib. Is also keeping us downwind. Dead downwind there. Wind we're right downwind. I have to decide before nightfall.
Talk about nightfall. I got closer to the equator, of course. The days were the same length as the nights. So it was 12-hour days and 12-hour nights. So it was dark every evening, pitch black by 6 o'clock. So I knew I had to do any sail configuration, any changes by about 5 o'clock. So anytime, I kind of learned that as soon as it got dark, after about half an hour, the wind would pick up and things would get a bit kind of rougher generally at night. So I reefed down a bit more at night to make it easier, because I was caught out a few times. I had to be up and down all night. I had a head torch up and down the deck, strapped on and clipping off, and you're just not safe, really, because you're on your own, middle of an ocean, clipping on, clipping off, and totally. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I was totally naked all this time, because we all realised too that after the first few days, because you're sitting, like for a small boat, there's always spray coming over the boat. For a sunny, dry day, the boat is coated in salt crystals, either wet salt crystals or dry salt crystals, but salt is everywhere. So your hands are always crusty and torn with the salt crystals. So if you get the salt on your clothes and your bottom, so you're sitting down in a cockpit, and even if it dries in the sun and you go down below and you sit down or go in your sleeping bag, your own body heat and your body, your own sweat wets it again. So you get clammy, sticky clothes. so your trousers is stuck to you, your shirt is stuck to you. So after a few days, you just take them off. And it was easier just to move around naked, and the salt dried on you, and it didn't seem to get clammy down below half as much. We didn't spend much time on deck. I spoke to other guys afterwards. I'd say I spent more than an hour a day on deck because it was more comfortable lying down below. And you were always conscious that you had to conserve your energy and conserve your head. If something goes wrong, you're going to have to turn it on quickly. And you're always conscious of conserving energy and just keep it straight, keep it level, keep it going. Don't do anything drastic and don't do anything silly. Like I spoke to a doctor, there's a big medical kit I had to take with me. And I have a habit of kind of rushing around on boats. And she asked me my habits on the boat. She knew her stuff. And I said, well, I tend to rush around. So, well, stop rushing. You can't afford to get injured. Like if you could break a finger, if you fall, you break a rib, you crack your skull. So I had to consciously slow down and move more slowly to avoid getting injured. Now, thankfully, I didn't get injured at all. But that's when on your own, you're, what? Like in the middle of it, you're 1,500 miles from shore. And I saw very little. I saw one or two boats in the whole crossing. There was a lot of traffic on the way down between the Canary Islands and the Cape Verde Islands, but very little. When you leave the Cape Verde and you head directly west, I think I only saw 2 boats in 3 weeks. There. More videos coming up, I hope.
Now, today is the 28th of November, and I took down just trying to hide the camera from this. That's what the sea is like at the minute. So it's a big sea for a small boat. I was going too quick and I was nearly broaching. So I brought down the jib up there now. Right a bit better. Scan around. Go.
Poolbeg flag is straight out like plywood. Stiff with wind. And to those kind of days, I was aware of the sheer energy of the whole trade wind system. Like every November, the trade winds start and they blow from Africa straight across the Atlantic. But the sheer scale, that was my first time down there. The sheer scale of the volume of water, the energy in the whole system, all going one way. You're almost just on a conveyor belt, and there was no turning back. You just keep going because there was no way you could turn around and sail against it. You know, that was about 30 knots, 35 knots, I suppose. And every so often, 3 or 4 times a day, it'd be kind of a cross sea, some kind of semi-freaky or a little kind of a rogue swell would come across and slap the boat sideways. Because of the light boat, to literally shudder and heel over a bit. And several times to actually knock off the, to back the jib. So I had to go back out and take off the self-steering gear, bring the boat back online, and then set the self-steering gear again. Maybe 3 or 4 times a day, just because of sheer press of side bangs thumping you. It's like hitting a stone wall. because it is a light boat out there, you know, like it was only what, 800 kilograms, less than a ton weight, like a matchbox, getting tossed around. I guess what's next? We'll take it all together. Here's insight, and okay.
Okay, I thought I'd show you what it's like inside. I've never really done a tour inside while we're sailing. That's the main hatch there, the front. Swing it around, bunk, E-curbs, knee, stuff at the back, little bits and bobs hanging up. That's the hatch into the forepeak, which I always leave locked because what's the point in having a watertight hatch if it's open? So unless I need to get in there or get stuff, that's closed. Another little skin around here. Oh, sun is in the camera, it's right there. And around the back and all the bits and pieces. I normally, for quite a few nights, I've actually slept here in the middle because it's more comfortable. You get a lovely rocking motion. You're down on the waterline. Whereas if you're on either bunk, there's a lee cloth. If you're on either bunk, you can get tossed around a lot because you're higher up and it goes like that as opposed to that. So down here, I've often brought down the sleeping bag and all the stuff down here and just slept down here because it's more comfortable. And it's quicker, you don't have to get out over lee cloth if you need to fix something or get up or check the sails or so I can jump up and do it very quickly. So that's what she's like. Pretty cramped, pretty small. That's her. Anyway, a few more days to go hopefully and we'll be there in Martinique. Change of plan. Bye for now.
Talk about the change of plan. The plan was to go to Antigua, and I was a few days behind the guys when they finished in Antigua. And Pete, the guy from England, he texted me, he said, "Jim, don't come here." As he said, it's a shit show. There was nothing organised, and they just didn't like the place. There was an armed guard on the marina, and there was nothing ready. They were tied up onto a school pontoon. So I just wanted to finish it just across Atlantic. So and they were leaving the next day to sail the boats down from Antigua down to Martinique to get the boats on a ship to come home because the boats don't leave. There was no ships going into Antigua, it seems. So I thought, well, there's no point in going to Antigua just across the finish line. And Don he texted me to cross the finish line. I said, look, Don, why go up 150 miles across the trade winds and then come back down 150 miles? And so I said, no, I'm officially retiring from the race. He said, fine. And I headed for Martinique. So at that stage, I had spent 3 or 4 days going up to the latitude of Antigua. I was at 16.5 degrees north of the equator, and Antigua was 17 degrees. So just to cross up that half a degree took three or 4 days, crabbing sideways across the trade winds. And then I heard they were going and leaving Antigua, so I had to come back down again to the latitude of Martinique to hit that. And it's curious, I was afraid I was going to miss the island. I know it's a silly thing to say, but when you're 500 miles away, 400 miles away in the open ocean, and you're thinking, if I lose my GPS or lose something, I might miss the whole island. And I was gradually having to find my funnel, narrow my funnel down to aim for Martinique. We keep moving. I forget what this is now. We'll see. Just more sails.
Now today is Monday, the 13th of December. I just thought I'd show you this. This is seems to be a common configuration. I spoke to guys on a satellite text system we have, and they seem to be doing a lot of this. You have a pulled-out jib, and a fully reefed main. Just line up against the spreaders, just for downwind sailing, because if you put up too much main, it rounds up. I have the jib reefed from this morning. There was a bit of a blow this morning. Actually, last night was a horrible night. I was up and down all night, and there was 3 squalls went through. So I had to take that jib up and down several times. So I left it this morning reefed like that. Now don't be looking too close to the details, but it works. bottom line. Curling again, here we go. Probably doing about 4.5 knots. Not huge, but it gives me about 100 miles a day. That's what the gear there in the background. There's lots of little fish passing by, but you're not going to see them. Those little fish there staying with me, swimming beside me for a day. My what you call safety line came off there, so I have to fix that up. Anyway, that's what she's like, rolling along.
Just on the topic of fish, they were hard to film, but there was the most beautiful fish. They're like as big as salmon, multicolored fish, and they'd swim effortlessly at the same speed as the boat, in the shade of the boat usually, or sometimes just off to one side. But there was one day I saw the most beautiful sight. There was a big swell behind me, and it was backlit with the sun. And I saw about 5 or 6 of these huge, big, multicolored fish swimming right in just a few inches below the top of the crest, backlit with the sun, and they're rolling along at the same speed. Beautiful sight. Yeah, that's just an idea of the scale of the whole thing. There were our tracks along the bottom there, and the rum line is the red line. That's the shortest distance, but nobody went that way because the wind blows across. So I was the green one, Molly Clare, and I could just make out I went up. Before I got to Martinique, I had to go up to reach the level of Antigua and then right back down again, south for 150 miles to reach the latitude for Martinique. That just shows the scale of the big place out there. That's another thing, like I'm very naive about it. They're big oceans, and that's the shortest, I suppose that's the shortest real oceanic run you can do. If you cross the Pacific, it's a lot longer, apart from stopping in the middle. But it's big spot. Let's see what this is. No, whoops, sorry about it. 1 minute. There we go. Oh yes. This is.
And that there, folks, is the island of Martinique. You can just make it out on the horizon. It's the first land I've seen in 35 days. I saw it about 5 hours ago. It takes a while to work my way up there, and I won't be there until after dark. And my jib is flapping because I'm at the wrong point to say, but I just want to, there's a lighthouse dead ahead there. I want to get around that and coax into the right-hand side, into an anchorage for the night. Okay, that's the plan.
And to get there, because it's Martinique, and nobody had planned to go to Martinique, I had no charts for it. I had charts for Antigua and the islands around Antigua, and a chart for Canary Islands and Cape Verde, everything, but I had nothing for Martinique. But I had it on my phone on Navionics, so I had to spend hours drawing out charts from the Navionics into my logbook, just in case my phone packed up as I needed it. So I had to draw out a quick chart, all the light characteristics, the angles, kind of a quick pilotage plan in case my phone packed up, but she didn't. But again, stuff I'd never thought about, because that was the unforeseen change of destination. along if we can, and we're nearly there.
Well, I'm here, finally. At 1:30 this morning, it's Christmas morning, 25th December. I dropped anchor in St. Anne's Bay in Martinique. And the plan is to get towed into Marina tomorrow morning. And so those lights you see behind me there, lights in the distance. They're all big yachts tied up in, or not tied up, they're anchored here. It's just a beautiful place. I can look down with a torch and see white sand on the bottom. So anyway, we're here. Long haul, a lot longer than expected, a lot tougher than expected. Tougher in every way, mentally, physically pretty tough, mentally even tougher. Anyway, we're here now, we're done. Get the boat sorted. I go home to my family. Okay, bye for now. Good luck.
There we go. So Martinique was a gorgeous spot. My first time there, totally French. French language, euros, French law, everything. Just as a guy's, a taximan said to me, it's a tropical region of France. Beautiful place. Okay, I'll show you this one. This is the next morning, sorry.
Good morning. It's Christmas Day, and I'm in St. Anne's Bay in Martinique. So that's what it looks like. Take a look around there. Beautiful place. Tropical island, and there's loads of boats moored. Hard to see against the light, but there's lots and lots of boats moored all around the place here. Waiting for a great pal, Etienne, another competitor in the race. He's coming to pick me up with a little boat, and we're going to go into a marina. And just see if I can show you around the place. That's what she's like. Beautiful tropical island. The Leeward Islands, the Caribbean. The West Indies, take your pick. Bye for now. Look.
Right. And finally, Etienne, I spoke to a French guy he knew, and they came out to meet me. And that's the guy in front there is Etienne. He's the guy that won the race. And the guy in the boat, he's another French guy. He sailed across the Atlantic in that little boat, a beautiful little French wooden 28-footer, to be like a little Virtue, lovely little boat. And he sailed across the Atlantic, and he's just living out there, living the life. Dropped anchor, gorgeous bays, 20-foot deep, white sand, tropical island, cheap rum, loads of hash. Take your pick. And there's little Molly Claire sitting there. I hope, actually, since that picture taken, the mast is down because they brought down the mast for shipping home. So that's it, folks. Shin, any questions?
Well, that was brilliant, Jim. I'll say super. Quite a trip, a real voyage building the boat and the voyage itself. But let me ask you this, Jim, where's the boat now?
The boat is still right there. It's still in Martinique. I've paid a deposit for a company called Seven Seas, and it should be lifted onto a boat in a big ship. And they're thinking the first week in May, and it's coming back to Southampton in the end of May. It was for sale. It hasn't sold yet. Some people said, "How could you sell it?" But I've done it. I built it. I did it. I've the bucket list. I've ticked the big box that I wanted to tick, and it's a very specific boat. It's a little ocean racing boat. That's what it's for. You know, everything's set up that way. All the little hatches and everything is. It's 3 watertight compartments. Actually, there's about, I think I counted, there's 17 watertight compartments from stem to stern. And so it's very specific. It's like having it here would be like taking a little sports car down to Aldi for the shopping, you know, it's a bit of a waste. So hopefully, now, obviously, if it doesn't sell, I'll keep it. And I'll do a few more trips around the place in it. But that's the plan.
Jim, what did the total cost of building the boat and the trip cost you?
The total cost to get that boat into the water, and to get the boat to the start, fully race ready, was 35,000. The actual building of the boat was about just a shade under 30, but all the regulation gear, the money just poured out the last month, I was spending every day. Like the life raft is a little mini transat life raft at 1,600 quid. The medical kit was 850 euros. EPIRB, everything just bump, adds up all the bits you need, all the regulation stuff that you need. Self-steering was 1,400 quid. I put an AIS on it, a full Class B transponder AIS, that's another 1,250. So that's all on top of just the hull.
Yeah.
Again, I was naive. I hadn't reckoned for all that. I thought I'd do it for 20 grand. No way.
No. How did you fare out with provisions, water, food, the whole lot? Had you ample food? Did you have to ration yourself?
I brought mainly freeze-dried food. Actually, I was looking online and I saw this company called Tactical Food. They're in Estonia. I just happened to walk down one day to my local, there's an outdoor shop called Charles Camping in Blessington, and he had a whole stack of it. And because nobody was buying it, he gave me a load of it for half price. So I got my whole supply of freeze-dried food. Actually, it was very tasty. So I had a little thing called, what do they call it? Jet boil. So it's a little canister thing with a little, it's a canister of gas that you boil water very quickly, just boiling water. And I'd open the package, pour in the boiling water, store it, close it. I give it 10 minutes and it would soak up and soften up. And then we made meals, as well as a few bits and bobs I bought, like the eggs and cheese and bread. So when I finished, I just had 2 days food left, but I had loads of water. We had to bring 120 litres of water by regulation. And I had about 40 litres left. I know some of the guys, when they realised their own water intake, as soon as they calculated as their water intake, they dumped a lot of the water halfway across. And one guy finished with literally a litre of water on the day. Right, you know.
Would you do it again?
I wouldn't do it again on my own in a small boat. I'd do it again in a big boat and with a fun crew. But it was a bit small. I've spoken to a few people beforehand who've done transatlantics, and I asked them, is it boring? And there is boring days because it's, actually the toughest part was halfway across. Because you've done all that work, you've done all the stuff you've gone through, and you're only halfway. You have to do it all over again. Do you get it? So curiously, halfway was the toughest point, But it would be fun out a good big boat and a good crew. But still, actually, I spoke to, I gave a talk here in Blessington 2 weeks ago, and I spoke to a woman. She was my daughter's teacher in school, and she took part in the Ark this year. But there's no self-steering. I think there was 8 or 9 of them on board, and they took turns steering around the clock. And she said it was tough and really hard going. And she paid for the passage. She paid a lot of money to go on the boat as crew. And just thought about it afterwards, and I thought, he's a very smart skipper in not having self-steering gear. So the crew had to have a rota and a watch system, and everybody was steering and then glad to not steer. Because if you have too much time in your hand, you get bored. So he kept them busy by working them the whole way across. So I would do it again in the right conditions, yeah, but not solo in a tiny boat.
Jim, you were mentioning the electronics. What did you do for power? Was it just solar?
Solar. I had I'd seen different plans of wiring diagrams and things, and I modified the best one I saw to make up my own system. So I had basically two separate systems, kind of a backup. And as happened, I'm so glad I did. I had two, just 80 ampere hour AGM batteries and 2 solar panels. And I was 5 or 6 days out of Canaries. And I was tired one night and left everything on. I left on the cabin light, the AIS, the radio, the masthead, everything was on. I got up this morning, the battery was drained. So I was able to rewire the VHF and the masthead light and something else onto the other battery just for safety, and let the other battery come back up over a few days. So it was all solar. So the only problem was my own fault. Like, there was no issue with it. Again, it was madness. I put that together here mostly, finished it in Lanzarotte, turned on the power the day before I left. I had 2 main switches from 2 separate systems, turned on one of them and nothing happened. Checked everything, finally found that the main switch, a 1 of 2, it didn't work. So to run up to Chandler's by the exact same one, I looked, they had it, I slap it in, and off she went. But again, there was no time for testing. Again, this is a lesson in what not to do in terms of deadlines and kind of rushing to get it done, because there was nothing tested. So I was lucky to get away with it. You know, like that's actually, a woman asked me after a lecture, after a talk, she said, "Tell me your overriding emotion from the whole thing." And my overriding emotion is gratitude. You know, I'm so grateful to have got to do it, to have the time, the energy, the money to get the boat built, which was all done during COVID, the whole thing. The friends that helped me out in Poolbeg, fantastic. Got it done, got away with it, essentially. Did the dream, crossed the Atlantic, and no injuries, and got home. So I'm just delighted to have done it, you know.
So you'll have to sail her back from Southampton now. Is that the plan?
That's the plan. Yeah, that'll be a fun sail, hopefully. Just do little day hops, go along the south coast and bring it up.
Yeah.
Kilmore Key, then back up there, she. All going well.
You were saying, Jim, about glassing the hull, etc., and was hard going. What time of year, what temperature was it, or was temperature an issue with you when epoxying?
Temperature was an issue because I started building in September, and it got cold. It was grand up to middle of November. It got cold then, and one day I had big 20 litre pots or cans of epoxy. There's like a 5 litre of epoxy, sorry, a 20 litre epoxy and a 5 litre of hardener. So 25 litres together. And I was pumping them one day, there was pumps on them, and the pump broke. And I rang the guy that sold me and said, "Oh, that doesn't happen." I said, "I've never heard of a pump breaking." And we were talking about it. He said, "How hot is your shed?" And I said, "It's 10 degrees. He said, "No good, too cold." Like epoxy needs 12, 15 minimum. So I Googled it, and the simple way was I bought a reptile mat that goes under a snake cage or a snake aquarium, no, a vivarium. And I made a cardboard wardrobe basically. So I had a piece of polystyrene on the floor, the heat mat on top of that, the epoxy big jars, cans on top of that, and the cardboard wardrobe put over it. And after one night, they were nearly 25 degrees inside of that. So they pumped freely. And I had to insulate the little shed a bit more and put on heaters. So I left heaters on low round the clock for about 3 months. I think I had a big bill last March, 12 months after a whole winter of heating a shed. But I had to do it because epoxy needs roughly 15 plus, say 12, 15 degrees to mix well and set properly. You know.
What brand of epoxy did you use?
West System. The whole thing was West System from Waller and Wickham up in Malahide. Ryan Dunfer there, I damned Ryan with questions. I have to say he was fantastic. Every second day I was checking about what will this, what I'll mix with this, what such and such, and he answered every question. Lovely guy.
We're bringing her back from Southampton, and for the future, would you think about putting an outboard motor on her?
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's another thing I didn't mention. We couldn't use outboard motor, or we couldn't use petrol motors. We had to use an electric outboard motor. And 3 of the guys had a make called the most expensive one you can get, about $2.5 grand. Again, that's another thing I hadn't bargained on. I spent $2.5 grand on this electric motor. There's one called e-propulsion. There's another one called can't think of the name of it. But I found a Chinese cheaper version up in marine parts up in Malahide there, or Swords, and it was a good little system, but you could never trust it. Like, you charge the battery and you weren't sure if you're going to get half an hour or 4 hours. Now I got it, and they're really just used for getting in and out of harbour. That's it. You wouldn't push against any kind of a blow. You would barely do 2 knots of it. So the idea was to keep it all nice and green and have electric outboards. But at the minute, for long distance stuff, I don't think they're ready. You need actually, the single. This is really silly now. The problem was all the batteries were the outboard motors were like 30 volts. I think my battery was 28 volts or something, so I couldn't charge it on board. And I hadn't thought about it in time, and so nobody had a way of charging their outboard motor, their outboard battery from the solar system. Now, if we thought about it and had time, I'm sure we could have doubled up 2 solar cells or 2 panels together in series to get a higher voltage, or we could have done some kind of a configuration with a smaller, say 2 or 3 smaller batteries in series as a separate charging system for the outboard. But again, we had the time. So we all ended up having to be towed in, which, if you think about it, all the mini Transat people, they're always towed in anyway. They're towed out and they're towed in, and they've no engine at all. You know, so I'll take an outboard with me, or I'll borrow an outboard, or buy one, or rent one, or something. Yeah, to bring it back just in case. Oh yeah, I have to. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. That was
very well. Thank you for the offer. It was a bit of fun.
Both sections were fantastic. And thank you very much. So that's great. Thank you very much, and all the best. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Jim. Thank you very much.
Good luck, guys.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jim.
Fair winds and happy sailing.